Welcome to A Course in Miracles, where you'll discover health and well-being through inner peace. Your host is Eloisa Ramos, EFT master and author of Beyond Self-Esteem, Discovering Your Boundless Self-Worth. Using EFT, the Ramos clearing technique, and the principles of A Course in Miracles, you'll learn how to open your mind to healing and to all that is inherently yours: deep fulfillment, vitality, joy, and inner peace.
Welcome to our program today, What is the World? With lessons 241 through 250 of A Course in Miracles. My name is Eloisa Ramos, and today we will be exploring what this is that we look at and experience every day and believe we live in. Is it real or illusion? A Course in Miracles says the world is, quote, false perception, unquote, which is another word for illusion. So today, we seek to distinguish between reality and illusion in exploring the topic of this day. I had some difficulty with the question, what is the world? Because it felt like I was a fish asking, what is water? If I was born a fish in a fishbowl and then asked, what is this that I am in? The other fish could say, it's the world we live in. Fine, but what is this world we live in? Answer, it's everything around you, everything your physical senses perceive. Okay, but did that really answer my question? No. Did that answer tell me what I am and that I live in a container full of water? No. And as long as I don't know what I am and have no experience of being out of the fishbowl, I have no reference point from which to completely understand the concept of fish, tank, and water. So, even if a human could answer this question for the fish, because the human has a reference point that's beyond the water bowl and can see the whole world of the fish. Without the fish's knowing what it is and having an experience of being out of its limited environment, it would still not be able to completely understand what is the world it lives in. Perhaps it could intellectually grasp the concepts of fish, bowl, and water, but it would not have the experience to make them completely believable and real in its own mind. So here we are, just like the little fish, feeling contained in this, whatever it is, we called the world. We appeared here in birth, and we seem to disappear in death. Most of us take for granted that our identity is a separate body that finds itself in space and time for a short while. We rarely question this. When we do, the answer comes to us through different channels. In my case, it comes through a book titled A Course in Miracles. And what A Course in Miracles is telling me is that the world is false perception, and that it is made to keep me separate from my Creator. Okay. Am I going to really understand that? Not at first, because the explanation is coming from a different reference point than this world that I see and experience and believe I am in. A Course in Miracles is like the human that explains to the fish it lives in a fishbowl of water, because it is able to see the whole container, having a vantage point outside of the fishbowl. What helped me understand the idea of false perception, or the world, was reviewing the teachings of the origins of separation found in Chapter 2 of the text. I went there because A Course in Miracles says that the reason the world exists is because we cherish the idea of separation. So that's where I'd like to start today, and we're going to spend a good part of the program going over what is explained in Chapter 2, the origins of separation. And we're also going to touch a little bit on the authority problem. And then we'll review some of the lessons. So let's begin. Just keep in mind the reference point for the explanation that we're going to be given is outside of the world of space and time. The point of reference is eternity. And we can call it heaven, we can call it God, we can call it infinity, whatever we want to call it, okay? Quote, this is from Chapter 2 of the text. In the creation, God extended himself to his creations and imbued them with the same loving will to create. No child of God can lose this ability because it is inherent in what he is, unquote. So, we, the creation, the Son of God, have an inherent ability to use the creative power of our Father, the source of the universe, because we are like our Creator and not separate. This creative power that our mind uses is shared and therefore unlimited, and also called loving will. And will is with a capital, okay, because it's God's will. It extends, so this creative power extends because what is created has to be like its creator. In other words, Source extends itself to its creations because it passes on its essence or likeness, which is this ability to create. Again, the ability cannot be lost because it is inherent in the life or love that we were given in our creation and that we are, in essence. For this reason, our mind is causal and the cause of the world. However, there's an inconsistency here. Everything in the world that we perceive with our five senses is not eternal. Everything in the world is finite and constantly changing. It is here only for a limited time. All physical things, including our bodies, have a beginning and end. This is also true for our emotions, our wants, and desires. Yet Source extends its eternal nature and creates only the eternal through extension. So how can our mind, which shares in likeness to its creator, give rise and be the cause of a world that is unlike itself, that is bounded and limited in time? What the Course in Miracles says is that our mind is creative, but we can choose to use this power inappropriately. The inappropriate use of this power is called projection. Through projection, which employs perception, a world unlike God is made. This is why A Course in Miracles distinguishes between the word creating and the word making. Creating extends wholeness, divine perfection, and eternity like source. Making, on the other hand, miscreates a limited, lacking world where separation, fear, and death are possible. Quote, since the separation, the words create and make have become confused. When you make something, you do so out of a specific lack or need. When you make something to fill a perceived lack, you are tacitly implying that you believe in separation. Unquote. Page 44 of the text. Saying this another way, we are choosing to have our mind make a world unlike God and our eternal spiritual identity when we believe we are something other than eternal spirit, namely an ego body. What happens then is that this thinking gets projected and the world is made. The world can only reflect back to us what we think we are. So it will support our false beliefs about ourselves in the experiences we have in the world. That's why the world and separation are referred to as false perception, as opposed to true perception or vision, which recognizes our true identity as eternal spirit and one with everything. So, the world of separation is false perception made by a mind that projects false ideas about itself. The world is not separate from our mind that is making it, though it appears that way. Projection gives it that appearance because the mind that denies its wholeness and divine perfection will see itself as lacking and will not recognize itself as the cause of the world. So we will think the world gives rise to itself and is separate from us. Yet the world is what we experience through our physical senses, and these experiences get interpreted by our conceptual mind to support its beliefs that we are a body ego, separate from our Creator and others. This is what we want to see when we choose to believe in separation, and so that is what we see. We use the world to provide us with convincing evidence that we are ego bodies, obscuring the knowledge that we are the ones projecting this onto the world in the first place. The world can only reflect back to us and confirm our false beliefs. That's why A Course in Miracles says, quote, "The world is false perception. It is born of error and has not left its source." This is from the workbook in the section of What is the World. It arises from error because it's coming from the ego thought system that sees us as lacking, which is contrary to truth. Miscreation is another word for projection. Quote, "Projection occurs when you believe that some emptiness or lack exists in you and that you can fill it with your own ideas instead of truth. Page 17 of the text. When something other than eternal truth is valued, as is the case with separation, we trade knowledge for perception, and in that way we will see what we want to see. That is what perception is for. It shows us what we want to see because perception is subjective and uses judgment and interpretation. Quote, perception, which is inherently judgmental, was introduced only after the separation. No one has been sure of anything since. Unquote. Page 44, text. False beliefs are easy to hold on to when we cannot be sure of anything. We can judge and interpret things any way we want, irregardless of truth. However, it also makes our thinking very confused and inconsistent. Besides the belief that there's some lack in us, A Course in Miracles says the process of projection involves 4 other beliefs that together represent what occurred in the separation. And this is going back to the origins of separation from chapter 2 of the text. We're going to review these 4 beliefs because they show us how our conceptual mind works when it projects or miscreates the world. Quote, first, this is the first belief. You believe that what God created can be changed by your own mind. Second, you believe that what is perfect can be rendered imperfect or lacking. Third, you believe that you can distort the creations of God, including yourself. And fourth, you believe that you can create yourself and that direction of your own creation is up to you. These are the beliefs that need correcting in order for our mind to heal the separation and stop miscreating. All of these false beliefs require perception to make them believable. An example of the first, that what was created can be changed by our mind, is when I think I can be a sinner or bad or stupid, etc. I would be wanting to believe that my judgment has the power to change what God created. The judgment would change the person themselves into something different than what they are. Okay, and that's not possible. So what the mind is believing is that a person can be good and then change and then be bad. It misidentifies the person with their behavior, making the judgment appear personal. The second belief, that what is perfect can be rendered imperfect or lacking, requires comparison. We take an individual or socially fabricated standard to compare and measure ourselves and others with, to be able to conclude that we are broken, not good enough, or less than, or lacking in some other way. For example, a woman can believe or feel she is less than a woman because she did not give birth naturally to her child. Now, who subjectively decided that not giving natural birth made a woman less than a woman? Well, it was the woman herself when she made up the definition of the label woman that included the stipulation she would have to give birth naturally. She then compares herself to this standard, which she made up, and she finds herself lacking. This is false perception because the mind is using subjective standards to compare with. Only by comparing and confusing subjective standards with truth can we believe we have rendered the perfectly created imperfect or lacking. And remember that there is no comparison in love. The third belief that made separation possible in our mind, the belief that we can distort the creations of God, including ourselves, happens because perception interprets and can give any meaning it wants to what is happening in the moment. When the moment is not showing us what we want to see, we judge it and distort it to see something that is not there, to be able to match how we think things should be. This is how we see what we want to see. The mind makes up stories or images of what I think happened, even though it did not really happen. That's why witnesses of a car accident will have different stories. They will tell you they saw things that other witnesses did not see or saw differently. Our imagination fills in the gaps in our limited perception when we don't know. The fourth separation belief, I can create myself and that the direction of my own creation is up to me, is talking about the self-images we make of ourselves and others. A self-made image is a self-concept that tells us what we think we are. I am a mother. I am a man. I am a failure, etc. It allows us to believe we can define ourselves through labels and conceptual definitions. When we meet the requirements of one of those definitions, we think we created ourselves, that we made ourselves into that. For example, a young man may believe that to become a quote-unquote man, he has to lose his virginity. Until then, he will believe he's not a quote-unquote man. He believes that it is up to him what he makes of himself, as if he were not created already and not given an identity in that creation. These beliefs make the process of projection and the world of separation possible. Let me point out a big assumption underlying these four beliefs. In order to be able to change, render imperfect, distort what God created, and create ourselves, we would have to be more powerful than God. Otherwise, it would not be possible to do any of that. if God is all powerful, how can something change what it has created unless it is more powerful? So, when we hold this assumption, we will feel guilty and fearful, for we will think we have dethroned God. And now we can sit on his throne and believe we are self-created or created anonymously. Course in Miracles refers to this assumption that we have usurped God's power in the separation and therefore can create ourselves. It calls this the authority problem. Quote, when you choose to separate yourself from your author, you believe that your creation was anonymous. This leaves you in a position where it sounds meaningful to believe that you created yourself. Deny his authorship is to deny yourself the reason for your peace, so that you see yourself in segments. This strange perception is the authority problem. Page 49 of the text. When we hold this authority problem, we miscreate a world of false perception where in effect we have banished God. Quote, the world was made as an attack on God. It symbolizes fear. And what is fear except love's absence? Thus, the world was meant to be a place where God could enter not, and where his Son could be apart from him. Here, perception was born, for eyes deceive and ears hear falsely. Now mistakes become quite possible, for certainty has gone. Unquote. Page 413 of the workbook. The world, where people and things can exist as separate from each other and God, denies oneness and connection to Source. So, the mind that sees itself in the world as a body ego, separate from Source, has to deny its own creative power. Because it's not connected to Source, and that's where this creative power comes from. This produces great conflict, the denial of the creative power. The conceptual mind or ego thought system that believes it has dethroned God and made itself all-powerful is having to reject its creative power because it comes from Source. So, the mind will not see itself as causal, believing it is a body and at the mercy of the world. It is believing it is both all-powerful and powerless as a body. Quote, the ability to perceive made the body possible because you must perceive something and with something. That is why perception involves an exchange or a translation which knowledge does not need. The interpretive function of perception, a distorted form of creation, then permits you to interpret the body as yourself in an attempt to escape from the conflict you have induced. Unquote. Page 43 text. In order to resolve the conflict the mind placed itself in with separation, the mind has to let go of the authority problem and recognize that it did not usurp God's power, that it cannot usurp God's power. And this means the mind has never been separate from its creator. Okay, until this authority problem is resolved in the mind, we find ourselves stuck with two contradictory thought systems that cannot be reconciled, and so require a split of mind to hold both. The mind chooses to divide itself when it chooses to make its own levels, but it could not entirely separate itself from spirit, because it is from spirit that it derives its whole power to make or create. Even in miscreation, the mind is affirming its source, or it would merely cease to be. This is impossible because the mind belongs to spirit, which God created and which is therefore eternal. Unquote. Page 42, text. So, even though our mind is split and we can believe we are separate, we are never truly separate, because it is from spirit that the mind derives its whole power to make or create. And of course, spirit is one with God. The world of false perception, then, though it appears to confirm we are separate, is in fact affirming the truth of what we are, because in its making is the truth of our oneness with God affirmed. Until the mind recognizes that it does not have an authority problem, in reality, fear will be present. Quote, all fear is ultimately reducible to the basic misperception that you have the ability to usurp the power of God. Of course, you neither can nor have been able to do this. Here is the real basis for your escape from fear. The escape is brought about by your acceptance of the atonement, which enables you to realize that your errors never really occurred. Unquote. Page 18, text. Accepting atonement or correction of this false assumption that we have taken the power of God heals our split mind, showing us we did not do this because it is impossible. We cannot be guilty of hurting or attacking God. It is not possible because we are not greater than God. We do not need to fear God because there's nothing we have done or can do to attack Him. When we accept this, we accept the correction or atonement for ourselves that believes this false perception. This clears that false perception so we can see the real world and ultimately return to certainty and knowledge. Quote, perception must be straightened out before you can know anything. To know is to be certain. Perception is temporary, as an attribute of the belief in space and time. It is subject to either fear or love. Misperceptions produce fear, and true perceptions foster love. But neither brings certainty, because all perception varies. That is why it is not knowledge. Unquote. What A Course in Miracles is helping us to do is to straighten out our perception. Quote, right perception is necessary before God can communicate directly to his altars, which he established in his sons. There he can communicate his certainty, and his knowledge will bring peace without question. Unquote. So, before we can receive knowledge, right perception or true perception is necessary. This is the goal of A Course in Miracles, to help us unlearn the false perceptions we taught ourselves. The Holy Spirit corrects them when we open our minds to truth by willing only to know. We will to know by not valuing separation, and we do this through forgiveness, because forgiveness values unity and love. Quote, when the thought of separation has been changed to one of true forgiveness, will the world be seen in quite another light, and one which leads to truth, where all the world must disappear and all its errors vanish. Now its source has gone, and its effects are gone as well. Unquote. Page 413. The world is the effect of our false thinking. It's an effect. You can think of it in modern terms as all the special effects we see in the movie. They're not real. They're made up, and they're called special effects. So the world is false perception because the effects coming from our cherishing the thought of separation, which shows us we are a body ego, are unreal. That's why it's called false or illusion, because we have never been separate from our source and therefore continue to share in the Creator's likeness. With the guidance of the voice for God, we will recognize our true identity, and the world would then reflect this reality. We will see the real world that reflects truth and not illusion. The mind, quote, the mind returns to its proper function only when it wills to know. This places it in the service of spirit, where perception is changed. Unquote. Page 42 text. When I will to know, I stop judging because I recognize that I don't know. I have no basis for judging. Perception is uncertain, so why even bother to judge? It's not knowledge. Lesson 243 says, quote, today I will judge nothing that occurs. I will be honest with myself today. I will not think that I already know what must remain beyond my present grasp. I will not think I understand the whole from bits of my perception, which are all that I can see. And so, I am relieved of judgments that I cannot make. Thus, do I free myself and what I look upon to be in peace as God created us, unquote. Many of us cling to judgment because we are uncomfortable and even afraid of not knowing. And this is because we sense the uncertainty in perception. The problem is that we are substituting judgment for knowledge. I've worked with many clients where not knowing puts them into survival mode. It feels dangerous to them to accept that there's no way to know things through perception with certainty, or to know themselves through perception with certainty, or to know the world. This is because what they're doing is relying on their own strength and intelligence for their safety. So things become dangerous in our mind precisely because the world is perception, and there is always uncertainty, and we cannot predict what's going to happen, what's going to show up, and we are seeing ourselves as separate and alone and in charge of our own safety. Lesson 242 says, quote, I do not understand the world, and so to try to lead my life alone must be but foolishness. But there is one who knows all that is best for me, unquote. The belief in separation keeps most of us stuck in a survival loop. Since there's no higher power, we are on our own with our physical strength and conceptual mind as sole resources. No matter how physically strong and ingenious we think we are, our body and conceptual mind have limits, and we know that. When we reach these limits, we feel unsafe and scared. Lesson 244 offers correction to this fear by reminding us, quote, I am in danger nowhere in the world. Your son is safe wherever he may be, for you are there with him. He need but call upon your name, and he will recollect his safety and your love, for they are one. How can he fear or doubt or fail to know he cannot suffer, be endangered, or experience unhappiness when he belongs to you, beloved and loving, in the safety of your fatherly embrace? Our fatherly embrace is present with us always. The world has not truly separated us from that. When the mind disidentifies with its thinking and keeps its attention in the present moment, this embrace is experienced. The world of false perception only exists when our attention is not in the present moment. Our attention will be in the past, in the future, which don't exist, or split, and we cannot focus in the present moment. Whenever we have problems, our attention is stuck in our conceptual mind or ego thought system, because that's where false perception is found, and the problem is false perception. The problem does not exist anywhere else other than in our thinking. We spoke about this in our last program. What is salvation? Once we can see and experience that the ego thought system of false beliefs is not a part of us, we can free our mind and the world from suffering. Lesson 248 says, quote, "What suffers is not part of me. I have disowned the truth. Now let me be as faithful in disowning falsity. Whatever suffers is not part of me. What grieves is not myself. What is in pain is but illusion in my mind. What dies was never living in reality and did not mock the truth about myself. Now I disown self-concepts and deceits and lies about the Holy Son of God. Now am I ready to accept him back as God created him and as he is." Unquote. So, with that, we are concluding our program for today on what is the world. Thank you for joining me, and join me next time when we explore the question of what is sin. Blessings to everyone.
For more information about EFT, muscle testing, working with Eloisa, and to download a free version of the Ramos Clearing Technique, visit www.healingwitheft.com.